I've shared a lot about my accomplishments from building wealth at a young age to transforming my physique and improving my social and dating life, but the truth is I have made far more mistakes than I have had wins. But learning from these mistakes is what actually fueled my success. In my last video, I broke down my achievements and how you can replicate them yourself, but today I want to flip the script and I'm going to share with you the mistakes that held me back the most. Mistakes that I don't want you making because if I hadn't overcome them, my mental health, my finances, my physique, my whole life basically would look very different than what it is right now. And to be honest, the effects of these mistakes still linger and sometimes even stop me right now, but recognizing them is extremely important. So the first mistake that I want to talk about is simply being at home all day and not spending time with other people. If you think about it, most of your addictions come from your environment, especially these days with internet addictions, from social media to adult content to video games. A lot of this is directly related to how much time you spend alone at home all day. This really affected me, and I also started to lose motivation in the things that I needed to build the good habits and actually take the actions that would get me further in life. Because, at least for me, a lot of that drive to do hard things comes from the fact that there are other people around. Whether I am competing with other people, I'm trying to make other people proud, I'm helping my friends, I'm gaining status among my peers and attractive women. When I was home all day, I had less of a reason to do these things and do the hard things. And that's because when you are at home, there's literally zero threat to your status. Your brain has no reason to stimulate you getting better. And whereas, let's compare that to outside, you are constantly exposed to men who are trying to be better than you or who already are stronger, smarter, or better looking than you. So what you do is you develop the drive, which is done through upregulating your hormones like your testosterone and your dopamine to give you the energy and the motivation that you need to do the things outside of your comfort zone. On top of that, you are also interacting with women in real life, which is a completely different stress response and testosterone response than seeing them on a screen. And losing that, paired with the ease of instant gratification of, just having my computer screen in front of me, meant that I was constantly on YouTube or social media, even when I knew I wanted or had to do the real work that would get me somewhere. And at this time, I was really confused why I always felt so tired, lethargic, some of these low T symptoms, despite not exerting myself too much. And, at this time I was eating pretty well, but if you think about it, and I don't know why I didn't think about it at this time, why would your body give you something so costly like testosterone if you don't even need it because you're staying at home all day and you have no threat to your status? They literally use isolation for prisoners as a form of torture, but some of us are doing this to ourselves voluntarily. So for me, this hit hardest during my first 2 years of university, which were fully online. The first year was good because things were still new, but towards the end of my second year, I was losing tons of motivation to keep going, and I was constantly getting distracted, and these ADHD symptoms kept popping up, where I was just not interested in the things that usually I had no trouble with. Luckily, I recognized it fast before it actually affected my grades, and I started doing the same work that I would do at home, but I just took it outside, either to a library or a cafe, or, a lot of the times I would often invite a friend who was on a similar intellectual level, because being in an environment with other people, especially attractive women or a friend that I was in friendly competition or collaboration with, meant that I had these short-term cues on the consequences of slacking off. For example, if I ask my friend to come and then I start going on my phone or on social media instead of actually studying with them, I look like a dickhead, for just going on my phone. This whole thing made it so much easier for me to regain my focus, remember what the goal is, and have that motivation to study again. That way, once I kind of got that motivation back, I could eventually go back home to study, when I needed to lock in by myself. On top of this whole thing, it wasn't just motivation that suffered. I also lost a huge part of the emotional connection that you need to just feel good, because we are humans, we are social creatures. And, this whole beginning of uni happened for me towards like 2020. And so I was only texting my friends, and it wasn't the same as being with them in person. Because if you think about the moments that you've had when you are with your friends in real life and you completely forgot about all the stress in your life, all the troubles you had, any problems at home, you just had a fun time, why would you deprive yourself of that by just staying at home? I didn't get why this didn't click with me at the time, but that's because you were just so comfortable being at home. And so for me, getting out of the house, the first step that I did this to meet friends again was to go to an in-person gym instead of doing home workouts. On top of that, I played basketball by making a group chat with the guys that I used to play with, and this forced me to not only level up my fitness and my muscle growth journey, but at the same time I built tons of memories doing this. It was actually just way more than doing this stuff, because I was actually just building friendships with these guys. That way I was able to invite other people to hang out, talk, go on trips, make memories. All of this just gave me tons of new experiences, opportunities, different perspectives, all the things that really improve your mental health and make life what it is, the enjoyment of life. And so not only was this good for my social circle, my mental health, my motivation, this also bled into my dating life, because I wanted to get girls, so all I did was I spent a lot of time researching and watching YouTube videos on how to do this. But the more I watched, the worse I felt, because nothing was happening. I was putting in so much time. I think I even literally started taking notes at some point on watching these YouTube videos about dating, but I was so confused at the time on why nothing was happening. But it's pretty obvious, right? From an outsider's perspective, why would anything happen if I wasn't even leaving the house? All that information was useless if I wasn't going to take the first step. So I had to kind of stop living this, just research phase. I was kind of just coping there for the next mistake that I'm going to be talking about. But I had to start putting myself out, in the real world where opportunities actually exist. And it was only after I got outside that something started to change with my dating life that had been stagnant for so long. This leads me to my second mistake. Getting outside was a huge step for me, but it wasn't the only one. I realized I was still being held back by a second major mistake, which was that I was terrified of rejection and not taking risks. I was so afraid of being rejected and looking lesser than other people that I didn't even try and put myself in uncomfortable situations that I knew had massive returns if I succeeded. I was convinced, and I kind of just convinced myself out of cope, that if I had just done everything right, I'd gotten shape, improved my looks, made money, that the girls would just come to me, and then in my mind, that meant I never had to deal with embarrassment or rejection. And even though those things tremendously did improve my chances, even when girls did, give me signals that they wanted to keep talking, I was just so scared that I interpreted it wrong and I could get made fun of for that, that I never acted upon it. I was not socially inept. I had tons of friends growing up, but I had zero romantic female encounters before my 20s, despite, kind of trying. And that's because I always put the attractive girl on a pedestal to just not upset them, and then therefore cause myself embarrassment or rejection that other people would find out about. But I knew I had to fix this, and the truth is, it started with small steps. I didn't just walk up to random girls and start asking for their numbers. I started with the most basic thing. I just focused on being social with everyone. Once I got comfortable with that, I started being cordial with girls, just starting a conversation, zero expectations. It was just to prove to myself that I could do it without, getting rejected. And if someone wasn't being receptive, it didn't really affect me. It didn't embarrass me, because that's kind of on them, in my opinion. From there, I finally started being a little bit more honest with my intentions. I started talking about dating with my friends. I lost a lot of that guilt that I initially had, probably because of how I was raised, associated with, romantic relationships and stuff like that. And so all these things I had never done before, and having friends around, when we were going somewhere, gave me social proof, and it was less intimidating because I wasn't alone anymore. And so what that also does is it shows, the woman that I was just a normal guy with a good social circle, and that led me to getting more comfortable with the back and forth. And then once I was confident in my social skills, I took the next step, with each one building momentum. And that's when I finally, had the confidence to kind of put myself out there, since I was having a little bit of success in person, and the apps just gave me more opportunity, which then led to an abundance mindset. Like I said, there was a lot of guilt associated with, having these intentions, in my opinion, but that's completely false. Like, this is something we do as a human. You were made because, two people came together. And so I kind of removed that embarrassment and that feeling of, rejection or potential, embarrassment in front of other people. And what this did is when I was on the apps, I had a lot more opportunities because of it, just because of how it's designed that you just get to meet a lot more people. And this led me to having an abundance mindset. I wasn't desperate anymore for a single yes because I had options, which then led me to, asking out more girls or at girls, making more signals and asking me out, and also just higher quality ones as well. And so I realized that this fear of rejection wasn't just holding me back in my social life, it was a rooted problem in most aspects of my life. For example, in school, I would raise my hand often, but I would only raise my hand when I was like 95% sure that I knew my answer was correct. I'd hold back a lot of the time from asking questions that might make me look stupid. And, I know other people didn't think this, but this also made me a slow learner because I would then have to go back over to the lecture, find the spot that I didn't understand, then research it online or ask somebody in private. And a few times I was just wrong about this. And although this did have some value, going back and doing the research myself, by the way, a lot of people in university are so lost that they wouldn't even know what questions to ask. And more than likely, people would actually be happy you asked this question. I could have just gone more in depth into my projects, my practice, my socializing, because I just saved the time from having to, research all this stuff myself. And so I would have done just as good, if not better, with a lot more free time. Another example of this is with this YouTube channel. I've wanted to start it maybe a year before I actually did. And the reason I didn't is because I didn't want it to be a faceless channel. I really do think my personality is going to be very important for the growth of it. And so I was just very scared of like the rejection or the criticism I might get. And it wasn't until I had people encourage me to start and people give me like words of wisdom of not to care what others think that I actually went for it. And I haven't gotten close to the hate comments. I don't think I've gotten very many of what I think I would get, and in fact I've gotten way more positive comments than I have. But it's not like this issue is completely resolved for me. For example, I have a YouTube short series where I am shooting a basketball every day for 30 days trying to practice my three-pointer, and I really think it would do well on Instagram. However, I'm still not sure if I want to put it there because of this fear that I still have upon myself, because Instagram comments really do leave you way more exposed than YouTube. But, that's still something I'm going to be working on. All right, the third and final mistake that I want to talk about is appealing to false authority. So, when I was starting this whole self improvement journey, I saw these massive YouTube channels with millions of followers and views, and I kind of just assumed that they knew what they were talking about because it felt so much safer to just trust somebody else for their advice rather than figuring it out myself. But I learned that the hard way, that just because somebody has a big following doesn't mean their advice will work for you. So for me, this hit hardest with finances. I followed YouTubers with millions of followers like Jeremy from Financial Education or Meet Kevin when they would give you these hyped up stocks to buy. So I started putting my own money into it without doing too much research, or the research that I did was just very biased towards what they were already saying. And so initially it worked. I saw quite a bit of gains, but it all came crashing down when I realized that the people behind these channels did not even know what they were talking about and didn't make money this way. They made money because they knew that you would click the video and watch it. And they would get ad revenue or you would join their stock program. And so I realized I had to stop looking for these get rich quick schemes and just become an expert in finding a long-term strategy that worked for me. And I'm not even mad about this whole thing because I just think of it as the cost of tuition. It helped me learn the actual way of making reliable money, but I had to go through this, pretty bad pain at the beginning. But I do think learning it as early as possible is crucial because I didn't have too much to lose at this time. The same mistake slowed me down in fitness. I fell into the trap of following fitness influencers with big followers or big followings, not realizing that the large following didn't mean that that's how they got their physique through what advice that they were giving. In fact, many of them got how big they were or got how jacked they were through roids or the genetics that they had carrying them. And a quick story about this, one of my biggest positive influences in everything self-improvement is Team 3D Alpha, Megan from Team 3D Alpha. And I remember the first time I heard about his channel, I just completely disregarded it. I completely disregarded anything he had to say because Greg Doucette, who had a much bigger following, he was blowing up at the time, and he made a video criticizing everything that Megan had to say. And now I realize that it was actually Greg Doucette that started all this drama and beef for his own profit. I mean, if you look at his channel, he literally has a whole niche of unproductive fitness drama, whereas the information that I got from Team 3D was way more transformative for me. So for a quick recap, here are the 3 mistakes again. Stop being home all day. It is terrible for your mental health. Be outside where things are actually happening. Number 2, stop being so afraid of rejection. Make sure you're taking smart but calculated risks and find a long-term plan to do it by not blindly following other people. Try and become an expert for yourself, whether that is in money, in fitness, in dating, whatever the case is. Find a long-term plan that works for you without trying to find some sort of magic shortcut for all this success. So again, these are the mistakes that I think were very crucial for me to overcome. And if I have any more, I will make a separate video for it. And if you have your own, just drop a comment and put it down. I'd love to hear it. Other than that, see you guys later.